Well, hello everyone. My name is Ruthie Senanayaka, and I work on the marketing team here at Blueprint. We're so excited to have you on this and hope that you get to learn some really valuable information and about Databricks, just learn more in depth. And we have two really awesome speakers today. We have Eric Vogopol and Rick Freitas with us today. I will let them do their own introductions, but just to give you a quick introduction about Blueprint. We are a technology solutions company that does everything from strategy to execution. And we are really great partners with Databricks, and we're their Velocity Partner of the Year last year. And so we're super excited to be running these workshops for you. If you have questions, feel free to add them into the Q&A section. You can also hit the raise my hand button and to ask a question live, and I can hit allow to talk. So just feel free to do it either way. You can also submit a question anonymously if you don't want your name to be mentioned. But we're so excited to have you on this call, and I will pass it along to Eric and Rick to kick things off.
Yeah, hello. My name is Eric Vogopol. So I have responsibilities for tech and strategy across Blueprint. Been here for quite a while, deep in all things Databricks, and super excited to bring some cool stuff with respect to the SQL endpoint of the SQL data warehouse to you today. Rick?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Hi, folks. My name is Rick Freitas. I'm a senior business intelligence engineer, or BI engineer for short, here at Blueprint. I also manage a team of about 6 BI engineers. Been here about just over 2 years, and I've spent the majority of my career at a large software company in Redmond, Washington.
All right. Well, let's get going. I'm going to share my screen and we'll walk through some of the housekeeping stuff and a little bit of background on the Lakehouse and Databricks and the UI, etc. And then we'll turn it over to demo/workshop time. So I think everybody should have accounts and passwords that will live for the period of this workshop. And you're welcome to log in with us. I believe Ruthie has provided you the URL, your username and password, which is unique to you. And we invite you to join in and follow along if you haven't already. So let me share my screen here.
And while you're pulling that up, Eric, I just want to mention to everyone, if you did not receive an email for any reason, please do message me on the chat and I can get that over to you ASAP.
Right on, right on. All right, so give me thumbs up. I'm sharing my screen correctly. All right, sweet. Okay, so we are in Databricks right now. This is the Databricks web UI, and I want to make a really important housekeeping note first. One, if you are unfamiliar with Databricks, you will note that I have a navigation slide out here on the left, and we'll get into that. But there's a quick little toggle we want to turn on. About 2 or 3 months ago, Databricks released a new user experience. So we want to make certain we toggle that on and click OK, and it'll repaint the screen. And we'll get a slightly revised user experience, user interface. It's a little bit easier to follow along, and I like it much nicer. So once that's in place, let's review what we're looking at. So this is a notebook. So right now I am in a world in which I'm pretending to be an engineer. So I'm a data engineer, maybe an ETL engineer, and I'm in an environment, this notebook environment, similar to Jupyter notebooks, if you're familiar with those. And in this case, to prompt this session along, I've written a whole bunch of Markdown. So I've got a title and cells, and you can see each command. And because there's Markdown behind the command, it of course displays like HTML does. Or this notebook can contain Python code or Scala code or SQL code or whatever is necessary to fulfill the needs of me being an engineer. But I just decided to use this environment to acquaint you with Databricks, and nothing like not using PowerPoint. So the first thing, again, so from a navigation perspective, we're in the default environment, and you'll notice I've got the left nav, and I can see things like my workspace and recent notebooks I've had open, the all-important data tab, which we'll get to in just a second, any workflows that we may have running in the background, things like the Airflow, for example, it's version of that, right? It's scheduled workflows that keep data pipelines running. And of course, like all good modern cloud environments, we have the concept of compute and storage are separate. So I have data lake storage for storage, and I have compute for compute. And germane to the topic today, we'll get into, for the most part, all of these tabs. Rick will walk you through, for the most part, all of these tabs that represent my SQL usage experience, both within the portal, so using the actual web experience such as we are today, and using SQL to do analysis, as well as, and we won't touch on this today, you could use external tools like Power BI and Tableau and Alteryx and whatever your favorite BI and data mining and data science tools are. They no doubt have a connection directly to the SQL environment of Databricks. We won't touch on live tables today, and we won't touch on machine learning today. We'll stick just to the SQL environment, but that gives you an overview. Now, I mentioned the all-important data tab, and we'll get to that in just a second. But before I do, I want to make certain folks have a quick understanding of kind of the architecture, if you will, of the Databricks Lakehouse. And I know this is somewhat of an eye chart, but we're really just going to focus on this bottom Delta Lake icon, the data icon on the bottom. And this, in my case, because we're in Azure, is nothing more than cloud storage. So in the Databricks environment, like a lot of cloud environments, the actual storage of your data is done just on normal cloud storage. So if you're in AWS, it would be S3. If you're in Azure, it's Azure Data Lake Storage. If you're in GCP, it's Google Storage or Google Store. And then, of course, we're using the Delta Lake format to save our data. It's super fast, unbelievably well supported in the community, and it has all of these attributes. So this is where all our data are. And then, of course, within Databricks, we connect Databricks to our Delta Lake. And now I start the typical left to right orientation. So what we've done for you today is Rick and I have acquired data. We've acquired a bunch of CSVs from wherever their site was. And we've got data for the Iowa liquor store sales, which is a lot of fun data to examine. We have data for the ubiquitous New York City taxi data, and then data from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics and flights data. We've built tables, so they're ready to go. We have raw data in a set of tables that represent the data exactly as it was sourced, and we call, generally speaking, that area of the data lake or area of Databricks raw. Sometimes it's called bronze, we call it raw, not a big difference. Rick and I have enriched and enhanced that data. We've validated some of the data and improved the quality of the data, typical engineering patterns that we would do in any cloud warehouse. It's machine learning ready and analysis ready, and we call that clean. So you'll see tables inside of a schema for clean data. And then finally, one good practice, if you're going to pass this data off for BI and analysis, is oftentimes you'll see folks in the data pro world summarize data and roll it up into summaries or group bys for aggregations like sum, min, max, etc. And it makes it performant for BI. Maybe that data is crafted in a model. Oftentimes that's called curated, or in the Databricks world, the medallion model, it's called gold. Again, we didn't prepare that here because it really isn't necessary. The data we're doing today is going to be off clean data, or the analysis we're doing, so that's fine. And then again, just to round it out, I've notated that external to Databricks, you can perform all of these functions, or internal to Databricks, you can perform all of these functions. And we're going to spend time here today with the analytics tool. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop there. If there's any questions on the general overview of where we are in Databricks and the Lakehouse pattern, Ruthie, maybe you can stop me if there's a question.
Doesn't look like we have anything yet, but I will stop you.
All right, good deal. Okay, so we're done with objective number one. Objective number two, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So in the SQL environment, as well as the engineering environment, we have compute, we have clusters to support the analytics that we want to perform, the queries that we want to perform. And in the SQL environment, there's an important change that came about, I don't know, a month or so ago. I think sometime within Q2, but maybe a month or so ago within Azure and AWS. And that's that our clusters are now serverless. We have a serverless option for our clusters, which is really nice because now I just define a very simple cluster. The cluster doesn't need to turn on. I don't have to wait 2 or 3 minutes for it to come on. It's always available. The first query in the morning at 7 a.m., for example, if you're a company and that's how your SQL environment works, that very first query of the morning takes about 10 seconds to light up the cluster, and then everything else enjoys super fast cached data throughout the day until the last query plus 30, 45 minutes or so. And then that cluster automatically goes to sleep for you. So there are other cluster types that you actually had to define and turn on and off yourself. Those were called Classic and Pro. They were non-serverless. But for the purposes of going forward, we're just going to use the serverless environment, and that's what we've used today. We'll actually show you what that looks like. We're going to get into a hands-on lab. And remember, I said we have the all-important data tab. And that's what this looks like. So I'm showing a picture of it here, but I'm actually going to navigate to it. So everybody on the call, I want you to think of this location in your left nav as your home base. If you're ever lost, or you just say to yourself, how do I just get a list of my tables and my schemas? Where's my data? Go to the data tab. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the data tab right here. And you get a very familiar user experience that we see in pretty much all cloud data warehouses, where I have basically a view into the Unity catalog, or the structure within Databricks that organizes my catalogs and my schemas and my tables. So that's the 2-point or the 3-part naming convention that Databricks uses. I have catalogs. I kind of represent server, or the top portion of my hierarchy. Then I have schemas. Schemas are the same as databases. And then, of course, I have tables and views and materialized views and all the things that you would normally expect to see. So for us, I'm going to drill right in here to this catalog called Workshop. And we have a schema called Data. I could have broken all of these tables and views that you're seeing here into their own schema. Could have had a schema for New York City taxi, a schema for Iowa, a schema for flights. I just chose not to. It'd have been very easy to move that around. I just chose not to. So you can see here, we're living up to the lesson that we laid out earlier. We have data that's raw, and we have data that's clean. And these are just tables, excuse me, or views. The great thing about this catalog, this Unity catalog view, is I can take a look at, say, some clean data simply by clicking on the table, click sample data. And of course, I see sample data. I can see details about the table. When was the table created? Where does it exist on the data lake, for example? And a bunch of other important pieces of metadata. I can see permissions. We're all a member of account users. We have the ability to select on this. So typical select, grant, create, etc. Those objectives. I can see history. I can see multiple times that this table evolved over successive updates. So I could go back in time and view a snapshot that, say, represented what that table looked like in the past. And finally, I can see some lineage about this table. So I can actually see that this table, this clean table itself, came from other tables. In this case, it came from this view, for example, is dependent upon this table, and so forth. You can actually see it kind of broken apart of what tables support what views, kind of back and forward. So if you want to navigate to this experience and take a look at how the lineage looks and how the table was created over time, you can certainly do that. And that's available for any table. Okay, so that's the data tab. Rick will also show you how to search the Unity catalog when we get there. And we can filter and list and do a couple other things. But that's a good primer. Again, if you're lost, always go back to data, and it'll just take you where your data are. So I'm going to jump back to my notebook. And my notebook here, oh, I got to say okay. And we'll jump to my repos again. notebook is in SQL Workshop, and my notebook was welcome, and that'll bring me right back to where we left. So with that said, we know how to navigate. We've turned on our new UI. We've got a cluster enabled for SQL Serverless. We know the all-important data tab. So Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's do some analysis.
Great, thanks, Eric.
Sure thing.
Hi, folks. I noticed that we've got looks like two or three folks. So as we go through this, don't hesitate to kind of raise your hand and ask a question as we go. Since we've got so few people, it makes it easier for us to kind of help you along the way here. I'm gonna start. Let's see. Let me go ahead and share. So everybody see my screen? Okay.
Looks good.
Yep, great, thank you. So as Eric talked about, we're gonna concentrate mostly in this area here in the SQL space, right? Because that is what this workshop is about. So really what we're looking at right here is the SQL editor, and I do want to point out a couple of things in here that I find to be pretty nice. So obviously you're probably not going to see all this based on your permissions, but you should have a workshop catalog. So again, we've got a three-tiered namespace here. We've got our catalog, then our schema or our database, and then tables. So a couple of things that are very nice features is you can just use these three ellipses over here, and you can preview in a new tab. And so what that does here over on the right is generate a query for me. And I can go ahead and run this, though you can see it's already been pulled up. That's primarily because the data has been cached in the background. I've been working with this earlier today. But you can take a look at the data that is available from this specific query, which was just dropped in a pretty much a select all based off of the data that's in here. Now you can also see I can take a look at my columns. I can also look at the data type that represents each one of these columns, which is a nice feature. And then as I'm looking at this code, I think maybe it could be formatted. So if I go up to these other three ellipses, I can go to format query, and it gives me kind of cleans up my code here a little bit. And I'm going to get rid of this limit 100 because I've already got a limit of 1,000 set up here. Now there are two options here: run all statements or limit to 1,000. You can just click these to turn them on or off. By default, they're on. I want to do just a couple of things here to show you a few features first, and then we're going to go through and do the same thing together, right? So I just want to identify a couple things that I think are pretty useful within this SQL editor tool. And one of those things really is around filtering data. And there's two features. There's a query parameters we're going to talk about, and there's filters, query filters. Now they're different. If you look up some of the documentation, you'll find not a lot. So query parameters started first, and then they've added filters. Filters, I am getting the sense that is where they're trying to move people to instead of using a query parameter, which I'm going to show you here again in just a second. But query parameters really filter the data at runtime, where filters work on a data that's already been loaded to your web browser here, right? So there's a little bit of a distinction there. But in essence, from the experience that I've had in using both, they're almost identically the same, and filters are actually a little bit easier to use. So let's do this. I'm gonna start typing. You can see that there's IntelliSense in this this engine, which is really nice. So I just hit enter, and it filled in where, and then I'm going to start typing a column name. So we see down here I've got airline, and it actually is referencing that column line and telling me what table that it's pulling it from. So perfect. I want airline. And then I'm going to add, again, what we call a query parameter here. And what I'm going to try to do is filter down my airline column of data here. And because I know airline is a text string, then I'm going to put a single quote. So it actually puts both of them. And then I'm going to come down here and choose parameter. And I'm just going to give it a key name, which title, they could be different, but by default, they set this as the same. And then there's a couple different options. Now, if I choose text option, I would actually have to type in the name of an airline. Now, it's case sensitive, so that's really not a good option. Number doesn't work here because we're not using a number column. Drop down list I could use, but I'd have to type in the names of the airlines that I wanted to have in my filter selection. So I don't really want that option. So I'm going to go to query-based dropdown. And what that means is that I've created a query, and I'll show it to you in just a second, that is basically a select distinct on the airline to give me a list of all of the airlines that I have. So it will populate this query parameter with that list. And so I'm going to choose query-based dropdown list. I'm going to go here, actually, because it's going to pull up a list of queries here that that are available. I'm going to choose this airline param one, and I'm going to hit add parameter. So now you see this little widget that's been added down here. And if I use the drop-down list, it's actually showing me all of the different airlines that are in this data set. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Alaska and apply changes. You see now that it runs the query on, and this is a good distinction between this and filter, it runs that query on that query parameter that we just added here to this query that we're doing, right? Now, I can also add a filter parameter, and I'm only doing this just so you can see the distinction between the two. If I choose, let's choose origin state, and I can make this multi-select. This option is helpful if you're creating visuals. I'm going to go ahead. It's basically, it highlights relevant values. I'll go ahead and just turn this off for this case, and then hit save. Now you see I get another widget here, is what they call them, and it actually has populated all of the origin state. I didn't have to pull in a query parameter to do that. I just have them all here. I could choose California, and you can see automatically didn't go back and hit the table. It's just filtering the data that is on screen, that's in cache here. And since I did multi-select, I could also add Colorado, which would probably show up if I come down here a little bit. There we go. We see Colorado. Right. So these are two different filtering mechanisms that can be used, which is really important as you think about what you're trying to accomplish in any kind of lightweight dashboarding, which I'm going to show you here in a minute. It really makes really helpful because you always want to filter your data, at some level, right? Typically around some kind of time series. Or any of your dimensional fields, you typically want to do some kind of filtering on that data. And so really, really nice little feature that's available here in the SQL editor. So I'm going to go ahead. Actually, I'm sorry. I think I told you I was going to show you the query parameter. If I click on this button up here, I can open some existing queries from this window. I could have also gone to queries, which we'll show you in just a minute. And this sometimes takes a little bit of time to pull up. So I'm going to go ahead and open this query. And again, another feature here, which is not unlike SSMS or any other SQL editor tools you've used. You've got an additional tab here. So you've got our prior tab that our first query. We've got a second tab that has another query. You can see I've just done a select distinct on airlines, which gave me this list, which is the list that was pulled in for the query parameters here because that was the option I chose, was a query-based drop-down list. Let me pause there and see if there's any questions on anything I've covered so far.
I don't see any questions that have come through, but if anyone has, feel free to add them to the Q&A.
Great, thanks, Ruthie. Okay, so there's a couple things that we've done. So now let's talk about a couple other things that are actually new in this schema browser window, right? So I'm looking at all data here, but for you is actually showing me basically the table that I've hit prior. So it's just been this perf clean one. And just identifies it. So it's context sensitive to what I've been doing. Now I can always switch this back, but this is a newer feature, which I think is kind of neat. A couple of things that I do want to mention when we're talking about doing any kind of analytics in Databricks SQL is if any of you are in the BI space and have used larger BI tools, you know, we typically have some kind of semantic modeling layer for our data. And in this case, really everything is driven by a query, right? So in essence, your query or queries are your semantic modeling layer in this case. And so it's a really important distinction because what you're trying to do is either create some one or multiple queries that you're going to utilize in creating visualizations, or just ad hoc in being able to understand what your data, how the data has been structured, how it's been set up, what is the data telling you. But it's really important to understand. And I think, like, if I was to run my analytics business off of this tool specifically, I would go back to what Eric was talking about. And as you're seeing, we're kind of pulling things from the clean layer, but I would probably set up items in a curated layer that maybe has a view that has some of those join mechanisms. So let's say I'm trying to do sales and I know that I've got a geo dimension. So I've got maybe a region or a market or a division, and I've got my product hierarchy for the products that I'm trying to sell. I would probably establish some kind of views that have that data pulled together so that then I can basically create a query that pulls all of that information in together and then build my dashboard off of that. Now, we're not doing that in this case, because I want to show you also that you can, in essence, build multiple queries and use those different queries for a dashboard in your visualizations that you want to do. So with that, let's go ahead and go over to queries. And I've noticed after the latest update, this takes a little bit more time than it used to pull up, but so this should populate here in just another second or two. Here we go. And so queries really is a list of all the actual, SQL queries, the objects that have been created and saved in the past, either by you, by yourself, so my queries, or all queries. And one of the couple of things that you'll notice is that, sorry, this is taking a little longer to populate than I would expect. Come on. Let's go back, and it just populated when I did that. I'm sorry. All right, so if I go back to my queries, which just reduces the list to the ones, you do have a couple of neat features where you can star these that become your favorites. There is opportunity to tag things, which is very useful. We haven't tagged anything here, but is a useful feature. So together, I'd like us, if you haven't gone yet, go into queries. Again, you may not see the same list of queries, but you should see one called Flight Performance 2. And we're going to use this. This is a query that has multiple queries in it, but we're just using it as a container, and we're going to copy and paste some queries from here into a new query, and then save that new query. And then we're going to use that to create a dashboard. So let's just make sure everybody's able to pull up flight performance too. Hopefully you have that. And now a couple things I will call out here. If you're used to SQL Server Management Studio, typically when you run a query that has multiple queries, you're going to get multiple windows down below, right, with each separate query. Databricks SQL does not do that. It's actually going to populate the last query in the list here. We're not using that one, but just so you're aware of that. And one of the reasons it does that is because really when you're talking about, again, generating a single query, you need a single query for it to be able to create a visualization off of. And so we really can't have multiple queries in a single container. But we've done this just to make it easy so that we can copy and paste 3 or 4 of these over into a new query window. So that's what we're going to do. So why don't we go ahead and grab this first one at the top, starting on line 2 to 3, and go ahead and do a Control-C. We're going to create a new query. So we just hit that plus sign, create new query, and then we're going to paste this in, Control-V, and we're going to run it. And as you can imagine, based on this query, we've got just a count of 1 item in here. So this is going to be my flights on time. So one of the things before we go any farther, let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to call this flights on time. You can do the same or any name that you want, but we're going to reference these as we create a dashboard. So just make sure you know what these are called. So I'm going to hit save. Now, a couple other features in here. You can set a schedule for this query to run, daily, hourly, whatever you want to do there. You can share it, and then again, you can see what SQL warehouse, or what was before called the cluster, which one we're using here, and that it is serverless. All right. So now we've got a result here in the table. We're going to go to the plus sign and we're going to hit visualization. And it pulls up this window. It tries to make a decision on which visualization should be used here. This one's probably not the right one. So we're going to scroll down and we're going to find counter. Where did counter go? There we go. Right there. So we're going to choose counter, and then we're going to go ahead and give it a name or a label here, flights on time, and we're going to save this. And so now what you see in this query, not only do I have my table results, but I also have a visualization. We could rename this. I could call it flights on time right here as well. It'll pick that up in the visualization. And then now, so we've got one thing created. We're going to do this 3 more times. I know this might be a little lengthy, but we're going to get through it pretty fast because and I should have showed you this first. Let's just do this real quickly. I went down to dashboards. I went down to flight data. And in essence, we want to build this view out, right? Not very simple. Again, a very lightweight dashboarding tool, but very effective, very simple to use, and really allows you to look at your data in just about any visualization that you can imagine. So I'm going to switch back up to my SQL editor here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy my code that's from lines 7 to 11. So this one is how many flights by year for a complete data set, for the complete data set. So I'm going to do Control-C. I'm going to come up here, create a new query. I'm going to paste this in. I'm going to run it. and I am going to get my flights by year and the total number of flights. All right. Now we're going to go and actually, before I forget, let's go ahead and save. Let's call this flights by year. And let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and create another visualization. All right, so it decided to do maybe a line chart or a scatter. Let's go ahead and switch that over to line. I think that looks okay. If you can tell by default, it decided what to use for your x-axis, right? And so time is usually the best thing for your x-axis, and then you've got flights on your y-axis. I think this is fine. Let's go ahead and save this. So again, I have another visual. Again, I've got my results here. I've got another visual. They're contained in this SQL query. And I can go ahead and give this a name as well, which it'll pick up in the visualization or in the dashboard that we're going to create. And then let's go back to flight performance 2. Let me stop there. Any questions on what we're doing? Any comments on needing to slow down or anything? Just please let me know. All right. Let's do another one here. Lines 15 through 19. I'm gonna copy this. Open, create a new query. Drop this in. Actually, I think I want my limit to be 20, not 5. Gonna run this. And again, just calling out a couple things. Want to format that query, you certainly can from the 3 ellipses up here. Again, I could throw a filter in here for, let's say, my airlines, but I'm actually going to do that at the dashboard level. So we'll show you that as we get to creating a dashboard. So let's go ahead and do another visual here, visualization. So this one's interesting. It actually determined that a bar chart would probably be pretty good here. And I like this, other than it's kind of sorted alphabetically here. So let's go to the y-axis and let's turn sort values off. All right, so now we see we've got kind of a descending amount here. It might also be nice to have a data label on this one. So you can see it automatically gives me a format here. I might just back out a couple of the decimals because we really don't need that. So I think that looks a lot better. Colors, you know, it's going to give me a default color here, but could go in and change that if we wanted to. So we'll go ahead and change that. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this. Let's call this flight departures, or yeah, maybe flight departures delay. Okay, guys, thanks for keeping up with me here. Let's do one more. I promise this is it. And then we'll move to doing dashboard. All right, so this one from line 23 to 27 is top city pairs, original and destination by flight count for a sand key visual. So let's go ahead and we're going to copy this. We're going to create new query. And we're going to Control V in here. We're going to run this. And you can see pulled back pretty quickly. Again, we're just doing a top 1,000 here. We could change that if we wanted to. So we've got a stage 1 and stage 2, which is really what's needed for a sand key. So let's go ahead and choose visualization. didn't really read that right by default. So let's go down to sand key. Yeah, there we go. So like that, hover over anything, which we'll do in dashboard as well, showing you kind of that origin to destination. So pretty neat little visual. Let's go ahead and save that. And I'm just going to call this, how about just city pairs. And we'll, just so I don't forget, we're going to name the query as well, because it's going to ask me to find that query when I'm creating my dashboard. So let's call this flight city pairs. Save that. Okay. So now we've created 4 separate queries here. And with each of those, again, you've got a results, which is just your table. And then we've also created our visualization along with those. So now let's go ahead and go over into dashboards again. So go ahead and click on the dashboards tab, third one down here over where SQL is. And we're going to create a new dashboard. And I'm just going to call mine flight data test, since I've already got flight data. And I'm going to hit save. So again, I just hit create dashboard in the upper right corner and hit save. And now I'm in a blank canvas and I'm in edit mode. So what I can do, yes.
Sorry to hop in here,
Yeah,
but
no
we
worries.
had someone mention that we haven't renamed one of the new queries.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back and take a look and see. Was it this one? It was this one. Fabulous. Well done, folks. So this was my flight, yes, flight departures delay. Love it. Thank you for catching that. So let's go ahead and save. And good. Now we know we've got all of these saved that we need to. Perfect. All right, so let's go back to dashboards. I created this dashboard, nothing in it yet, but I can open it back up. Now, this time when I open it up, I'm not in edit mode. So this was actually good. So even though I don't have anything in here, I'm not actually in edit mode. So I'm going to use the 3 ellipses up here and I'm going to go into edit. And then as you see, that brings up this add drop down. And so I can now do a couple things. I can add my visualizations. I could add a text box in here, text box that we can drag in here. I believe this uses Markdown. So I believe if I just type this for heading 1, I can put flight data for USA and add to dashboard. All right, so now you see I've got one item in here. It is just a text field. This can be dragged all around. You see that we've got a grid system here that it puts things into, which is nice. All right, so now let's go ahead and bring in some of our visualizations. And so now we know we've got the most recent queries that we've been working on here. So flights on time was just the single counter or card that we were using. Now this is one thing to point out. By default, it pulls up the results tab, which is your table. Now you could always pull in a table of data if you wanted to, but we're really wanting to pull in the visual. So I'm going to go down to what the visual is called a counter here, and I'm going to choose flights on time. And I probably just clean up the title of this a little bit. I could add a description if I wanted to, and then hit add to dashboard. Again, I can drag this around where I want, so I think I'll put it over here. I think maybe make it a little bit smaller. Yeah, you can play around with that. All right, let's do this again. This is, guys, this is so easy and so fast. I'm going to do my flights by year. Again, I'm going to use the drop down here, flights by year, because again, you can see the chart, flights by year. Probably want to clean this up a little for a title, add the dashboard. And this might be nice here. Just leave it that size. I could, you know, again, you can snap to grid to a different size here. Actually, maybe I'll just take my title across the whole top. Okay, let's keep going. 2 more to do here, guys. Not much more to do. We're almost there. We're going to do the flight departure delays again. Thank you for catching that. If I hadn't named that, it wouldn't have been showing up in here, or I'd probably just say new query and we wouldn't know what it was. So we're going to do that. We're going to clean this up. We're going to hit add to dashboard. Let's see here. So let's play with this just a little bit. Let's make this a little bit smaller, drag this over at there. Let's maybe make this a little bit bigger so we can see the actual data labels that are in here. And then a couple more things we're going to do here. We'll do the last sand key visual that we had. That was flight city pairs. Don't want the result. I want the sand key visual. Add the dashboard, and there we go. We dropped it down in here again. Hovering over anything gives you additional information. Very nice. Now, one other thing is we talked about at the beginning, we have the ability to use filters at the dashboard level. And so let's go ahead and add a filter. As you can see, it says new there. And so again, the filter is going to utilize one of the queries. We could set up multiple, but we're going to utilize one of these here. And it's going to look for a column that is in that query, right? So if I go to flight departure delays, I'm going to choose airline here. And let's go ahead and maybe change this to multi-select. The reason I'm doing that is because maybe this is a good scenario for where I can do a comparison of 2 items. Now, again, I don't have airline in any of my other queries, but if I did, then there is a way to bring those together. We're not going to cover that, but just so you know that that's possible. So let's say I want to do Aloha and compare it against maybe Alaska, and let's hit apply changes. So what you're going to see is then you can see that this visual changed, and I can do a comparison on flight departure delays based on these 2 items. I could do more than 2 if I wanted to, but just use that as an example here. Okay, so let's actually, I'm going to get rid of that and apply changes, bring all back. And then I basically, when you're done editing, you've moved things around. I'm going to hit done editing. And basically now have a dashboard that we created in just, 5-10 minutes at the most, even including most of the queries for this, to give me some very good information about the flight data. So let me pause there and see if we've got any additional questions.
I don't see anything that have come through.
Okay, great. A couple of things I'd like to point out. So when you think about, if again, you're in the BI space, you do a lot of work in SQL. One of the things that I find that's challenging is many cases we'll have multiple different tabs I'll be working on. I'll be cutting and pasting things from different tabs, trying to create maybe, some joins and pulling together a bunch of things into one specific query. You get a lot of tabs up here over time. I'll end up closing ones because I get confused which ones. So one of the really nice features I like about this SQL editor is the ability to go to history here using this little button here. Now it's going to show me the current one, but I can go back and look at all queries that I've done over time here since I've been logged in. And you can see quite a few here. And so I could actually go through and look at and say, oh, well, I closed this query. I want to pull this one back up. I want to get some information from this one, and just click on it, pulls it back up, cache the data so you can see how quickly it pulled that information up. So really, from my perspective, a really nice feature as you're working through just the process that we all go through if we're doing anything in SQL. Let's see what else. So there is an alerts feature here. And so we could create alert. Alert is basically just a trigger on specific any field that you've got in a particular query, right? So I'm just going to call this alert test. I'm going to, again, everything based off of a query here. Let's do flights on time. This one's easy. I know it won't make much sense, but so you can pull the column. Again, I've only got one column here. Obviously it had 167 million plus flights on time. Now, of course, if this data isn't updating regularly, then this doesn't really make sense. But hey, let's just assume that in this case we've got new data coming in every time. So I could set a threshold value over a particular amount, but I'm just going to leave it at 1 here just to show you what this does. If I hit create alert, I've got a destination over here for where I can have the alert sent to. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but I think you can do webhook on this, as well as any integrate into any management incident management system you've got, something like that. Yeah.
Sure, you've got the typical things like, email, etc. And then you've got webhooks into like Slack and Teams and PagerDuty. And then, yeah, if you wanted to get crafty, you could put the URL into any webhook you wanted. So if your dev team had a webhook to ServiceNow or Freshdesk or any of those others, sure, you could send an alert. And it would contain all the necessary markdown and HTML you need and data that you need so that those tools can open a Sev1 ticket or whatever they need to do.
Yeah, really useful tool. You can see I just hit refresh over here and it actually triggered this, which of course we know it would because I'm just looking for greater than 1. So yeah, so that's another very useful tool. If we just go down the stack here, query history, very useful. Think about a scenario where you've got multiple users in here and they are hitting different things, and you've got an admin that wants to take a look at what's going on, understanding who's querying what tables, what's taking the most time. Like, let's say I click on duration here. I've got one in here that took 31 seconds to run. If I click on it, I can get more information on what was going on in this one. I really like the fact that you get these little hover overs that gives you some explanation on what these fields mean. You can see query profiles. So this one's actually been cached, so I don't get a query profile on that, but anyone that wasn't cached. But I think it's a really fabulous tool with respect to like admins understanding, okay, what tables are getting hit, and if they're taking a long time, is there some kind of optimization? Like, do we need to set a Bloom index or something on one of these tables to optimize it, make it more performant, right? So really useful tool from that perspective. What else, Eric? Help me out. What else am I missing? So many rich features here.
Why don't we take them to the SQL warehouse and just show real quick what the cluster looks like and its sizing obligations.
Okay,
yep.
Great.
So
all right. So SQL warehouse
is one cluster. Yep, we're all using.
Yeah, and so basically T-shirt sizes on these. They really just make it easy. to choose a particular size. Again, remember before these were called like SQL endpoints. This is the new naming convention for these. You know, really, it's just your compute cluster in the background here. Another really nice thing to point out. So if you are using third-party tools, you know, you're basically hooking to this SQL engine here in Databricks. And so in most cases, you're going to need a couple of things to connect to this data, specifically the server host name and the HTTP path. And so you can get to that very easy because it's actually utilizing this SQL warehouse to do that. There's a monitoring tab here as well that shows peak running, gives you a good indication of just usage. Questions, comments on any of that?
Nothing yet.
Okay. Well, it looks like we do have a couple more minutes. Let's see. You did talk about data. Again, this is a place to ground yourself. As Eric had explained, basically shows all of your catalogs, all your schemas or databases and tables that are available to you. Again, if you feel like you want to understand where things are at, this is the place to go to get back into it. And so you can see all the different tables that we've created in here. Again, we were using this Perf Clean one here. So Eric, any final thoughts from your end?
None from me. Great work, my friend. This was great. I hope the attendees got good value out of this.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you. Big thank you to Rick and Eric for putting this together. Just wanted to remind everyone that we do have a bunch of these workshops coming up. We will be adding more as we hop into the next quarter as well. So keep an eye out on our website. That's bpcs.com/events for all of our upcoming events. And make sure you're following us on social media because we will definitely be posting it on there as well. So you can keep an eye out for that. If you have any additional questions that you'd like answered, you can always add it to an email at info@bpcs.com. But thanks so much. We really appreciate this and we hope you have an amazing rest of your Wednesday. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everyone.